Hi, Jason. Welcome to EvantTalks podcast powered by Hoblo. And thank you so much for giving your time to us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the honor of being on your show.
So, as you told us, the topic would be power of podcasting for your events and events business. So, first of all, I would like to ask, is there any specific reason for choosing this topic?
Yes, I was someone who ran an events business, a very successful events business, and in fact was voted one of the top 100 event professionals in the world three times. And it was only thanks to, and I've been in your fantastic blogs. It's only thanks to being sick that I had to find another way to make a living and to stay an expert in my field, find money and find opportunity. And it's through podcasting that this all came about. And I wanted to share this technology of podcasting as a way for people to continue with their loves no matter what health or life throws their way.
So, I'm very amused that you are named as Lord of the Events. Is there any reason behind it? Because it's very out of the box to someone call someone Lord of the Events.
You don't have to call me Lord of the Events. My full title is Lord Jason Allan Scott. I used to be married to Lady Lavana Anthea Grafton the third of Grafton Manor, and the title comes with marriage. That's all it is. And the joke was that I was the Lady Gaga of events, so hence the
Wow.
Lord thing. That's all it was.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's interesting to know actually. So, Jason, you were and you still are one of the most demanded event consultants and speakers globally, especially in Europe. So, how do you feel about it?
I love it. I love being of value. I love being able to give back to a community that's given me so much. In fact, today I turned on my Instagram and there were all these comments, and it's because one of the event companies that I help, Canvas Planner, had written, "Thank you so much, Jason Allen Scott, for all your support." And they're currently doing an event in Germany. And I just thought, what an amazing life I get to lead, where I get to help other people lead their best lives.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually very amazing. So
There's
you
a great
have,
expression, sorry to interrupt you. There's a great expression by Mahatma Gandhi who says, "Be the change in the world you'd like to see." And I think that's what I try and do every day.
yeah, that. So you are also an entrepreneur and you run a podcast company. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So the great thing about podcasting is it allows for conversations across waters all around the world. It's a great way to prove you're an expert by telling it, by telling it to your audience, to telling it to your guests. It's a great way to turn your network into your net worth, to monetize not only the people that support you, but that work with you, that allow you to give back to society. So my event company still runs. We still do a number of global events, including work with mental health and calisthenic games, with ASMR, with kids, with Slime Festival that we're currently doing this year in Germany, the 3rd and 4th of October, and multiple others. And the podcast often facilitates that work. We have one of my shows is called Smarter Event Planning. We speak to 127,000 executive assistants and personal assistants who were never expecting to get into events and now are thrown into the world of events and are just looking to learn how to be better at events, how to work smarter, not harder. So that's why we created Smarter Event Planning Podcast. We then had so many other people from firstly events and then from finance and technology and a wide range of companies come to us and say, how can we use our podcast to push our message, to get in front of clients, to get in front of our perfect demographic? And I started making podcasts for other people. And before I knew it, we had 25 podcasts and 24 success stories. And I realized there was another business here to be created. And we created this business with offices in the US, in North Carolina, and offices here in London. And it's just been such a wonderful ride to teach people how to start, grow, and promote their shows worldwide.
That's absolutely amazing. I've actually read about your journey and I've also seen quite a few videos about you. I actually related with it when you said your network is your net worth. you should always engage with your audience, and that's the key to make any event better.
Absolutely.
So, getting to my first question of this podcast. So, you were into this events industry and now you teach businesses to make money through podcasting. Could you
hmm
walk us through this journey and how and why did you end up running a podcasting company?
When I was in events, I was the first person in the world to make £1 million using social media for my events company. I didn't realize that was a big deal. I thought social media was created to share stories, to created to have a dialogue with the people to which we serve. But also because when I was working events, I was working at a venue called Number One Leicester Square. We didn't have a promotion budget. We didn't have any money for marketing or PR. And we had a very bad name on Google. People Googled the penthouse or Number One Leicester Square and they heard stories about Russell Brand and about drugs and being shut down. And I didn't want that story to be out there. I wanted to control our story, to talk about Avatar and Mamma Mia and these parties that we threw and these people that we helped and Unilever and Nando's and all these big companies and FTSE 500. So I started using Twitter was my first social media to talk to my audience, to get feedback, to get questions. And it was great, except I'm dyslexic, so it takes me a long time to write back to people, and I'm not a big lover of cameras. So when Instagram became the big thing, I didn't love the photographs and then writing comments below. It also felt more like I was broadcasting. I couldn't get the results, the quick responses from people that I could get with Twitter, but we continued. Facebook became incredibly popular. I started using Facebook to drive traffic, to get testimonials from the clients that I was serving within events. But it was only when I realized that podcasting was basically radio, but that came from your phone or from your car, that I thought, here's an opportunity to broadcast, to tell my stories, but to get feedback from my audience. And I wanted to see if I could do the same thing for events. And the Guestless podcast was my first ever show. And I just talked about the fact that I was an event professional that was trying to start a tech company. And I started being really honest about what I was doing. And I interviewed event professionals who were also honest and excited. And then I got into other event podcast shows, and they brought a traffic back to my show.
Yeah.
And my show got more and more and more popular. And before I knew it, I was a failed technology professional. My company failed. My season ended with me at the back of an Uber saying to my listeners, I'm sorry, the podcast is closed. My tech company is closed. I'm going to have to go find a job. I'm going to have to go back into events. And all of a sudden, I got all these messages saying, please do a second season. Please, maybe sell something and we can buy it and we can give you some money and the show can keep going. And I said, well, what do you want me to sell? And they said, write a book about starting in events. And I wrote my first book, The Eventrepreneur, and we sold 55,000 copies. And it allowed me to keep
Oh,
podcasting for a living. Yeah, it was incredible. And majority was, funny enough, an Indian demographic and then a Norwegian demographic. And then it went to the UK. And then it went to the US. And then I got Waterstones and Barnes and Nobles all said, can we have a book? And I wrote a separate book called hashtag Event Profs. And I became a co-author in another book called Event Professionals Handbook. But it always came from the podcast, the fact that I could turn these listeners to fans, and fans will follow you anywhere. I remember doing an event for this amazing Bollywood film called Om Shanti Om. And
yeah.
we had
Wow.
so many fans. There was tens of thousands screaming, Mr. Khan, Mr. Khan. And I said to him, are these people in London? He said, people follow me all over the world. When you have a fan, they will follow you everywhere. I can go from making a musical to a drama, and they don't care because they are fans of me. And I thought that is the power of fanship. And that's what podcasting
Exactly.
allows. It allows you to create fans.
Moving to my next question. Podcasting has become very huge. How did this wave of popularity hit the events industry?
I think it's hit our industry because so many of our luminaires in this space, our Julia Solaris's, our Adam Perry's, our Will Curran's, all suddenly got podcasts. Our James Morgan's jumped on podcasts, who I know has been on the show, a great guest on the show. And I think it's the fact that we all kind of championed this dialogue. The biggest downfall of podcast is language. I'm only speaking in one language, so I miss out on a very large demographic that doesn't speak English. But outside of that, it has the opportunity to connect heart to heart, to go from your ears, where you're hearing me now, into your mind as you think about me. And hopefully, I do something good and I become part of your heart. And that's very difficult to do with writing. And it's very difficult to do in 140 characters on Twitter or one main image and some hashtags on Instagram.
Yeah, that's actually very true. Reaching out to people on Instagram has become quite difficult.
Yes. And the algorithms, you've got the algorithms of Instagram making it more and more difficult to be seen, to be affected. Whereas with podcasts, you don't need to do that. You can simply get someone on your show, send them an email, much like I showed you, that says, this is what our email is going to be. This is how we're going to do it. Doing a follow-up email that says, hey, Jason, you were just on our show. You were excellent. Here's the link to your show. Please share it with your network. And then
Mhm.
I share it to my 7,000 people on LinkedIn, my 10,000 people on Instagram, my 7,000 people on Twitter, my whatever all these numbers suddenly come and find out about you and your product and your podcast. And if you're lucky, some of those listeners will stay to listen to the next show. And that's how you build.
Yeah,
And there's no
that's
algorithm
how
for
we build
that.
an audience. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, moving to my next question, how can various enterprise and associations organizing events leverage podcasting for growing, say, their businesses or brands?
It's an excellent question. I think what you need to remember with podcasting is that you can leverage
Yeah.
that. I could know nothing about event technology, but the moment I have someone like James Morgan on my show, people suddenly think that James and I are equal because we're speaking equally. We're both talking from a place of expertise. So suddenly someone says, Google's James Morgan Event Tech, and my name comes up, and they think, oh, he must be an event tech expert. And that's something incredibly powerful, is the ability to put someone on the same stage as you on equal sitting, and all of a sudden you are equal to them in their class system or in the system in which they are seen. And that could never happen. If I've said this many times, if I didn't do a film like Avatar, I never would have got Om Shanti Om. If I'd never got Om Shanti Om, I never would have got a chance to work with Longines and Ashwari Rai. If I'd never, so the moment they saw that I was in the same level. I mean, I'm never going to be in the same level as Mr. Khan, but the same, that I was doing that kind of event, it meant that I could approach other people in that same space. That's leveraging, and podcasting is very good at leveraging.
Yeah, true that. So, following that question, where do a live event and a remote podcast find its synergy?
From the people. You need to find energy from the cause in which you're doing. When you're doing events, you find out what the purpose of the event is. Maybe it's to promote a new product. Maybe it's networking to connect people. Maybe it's exposure because they're trying to find PR for something that they're building. Once you find that, you work off the energy of the energy of the people in the room. With podcasting, it's from your guests, is preempting that energy, telling them this is who you're speaking to. I have Smarter Event Planning, 127,000 executive assistants dying for the show, for the Guestless podcast. I have 100,000 entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are dying to start new businesses. Get them excited. Talk to them on the show about what you're doing. In your event show, we've got a show called Pink Tank. We talk to financial experts in technology. We get them so excited that when we say and record, that energy comes out through us and into our listeners, who then respond with energy when they email us and go to our websites and respond on LinkedIn.
Mhm. So, one more thing, I've read that you have been to three continents and you have had businesses on all the three continents. So, how was it like?
It was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. I started a t-shirt company in South Africa called
Yeah.
OPM, Other People's Money. And I would take their money and then go and buy t-shirts in India and China. And then I'd add a print and I'd sell them the t-shirts. And it was great, except back then I was so young. I was 25 years old. I didn't read the small print. And I ended up getting bought out by a company who was loaning me money to make my company work. I then flew to Thailand land, and I was a teacher, I was a school teacher,
Oh
and I
wow.
kept losing children who were dying in the floods in the monsoon every year. And I thought, why? Why are they dying? And they said, because they can't swim. And I found out that a large portion of Asia cannot swim. And I started the first swimming school, Bangkok Swimming School, which is now the biggest swimming school in Southeast Asia. And I sold that, and that was beautiful and amazing because I was only 29 years old and I was retired as a millionaire. And I thought, this is when life begins. But it isn't. The truth is that I wish I had kept that company. I loved working with kids. I loved teaching people how to swim, and I taught parents and businessmen and ministers. And it was such a great to do something you love every day was incredible. When I then came to London and I started an events company, and I sold that events company, and I sold a beauty pageant called Miss Clubs. I had to learn about the English market and how it's all about paperwork and lawyers, and so different from both from Asia and Africa. And everything's learning. I think the biggest learning that I've had, and I've sold two podcast channels now to
Oh
one
wow.
event technology company and one investment technology company. And when I sold those businesses, I learned the same thing. It's about showing them what you've done and and how you've done it, the exact recipe for success, and showing them that they can do the same thing if they follow the recipe, and that you'll stay on for a short period of time to hold their hand while they're learning. Once you can do that, you've got a real opportunity to start something, to grow something, and then to sell something, no matter the continent, no matter if the legal is more important or the paperwork or the bureaucracy of how things are bought and sold. It's always about, do you have a recipe? People ask Ray Kroc, who was the guy that made McDonald's famous, how did McDonald's become so famous? And he said, because I have a book of step by step by step what you need to do to open a McDonald's. And if you stick to the steps, like making something, it'll always work. But if you miss an ingredient, you won't get the final product that we promise.
That's very nice. And if you were given a chance to go back to one of the countries or cities, where would you go back and
Oh
start
my
and
goodness.
settle down? Yeah.
I recently did Panama, which was incredible. I absolutely loved it. But I'd have to say the Maldives. I went to the Maldives, and it was just such a beautiful place, such great nature and people, and it's probably my first holiday at that stage in 3 years.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
and it's my last holiday in 3.5 years. So maybe that's why it has such a soft spot in my heart. But everywhere I've been, I'd like to go back to, whether that's Mexico or I was in Iceland last week. Next week I'm in Budapest in Hungary. I would go anywhere again and again because it reminds you of how big the world is, how small you are, and how all people are the same. We just want to be taken care of, spoken with truth, and shown love.
Yeah, that's very true what you said. So, getting back to the show, how podcasting can help organizers engage their audience, and what kind of audience should we actually expect?
I think it's important when it comes to, I'm going to work backwards, when it comes to audience, to think
Hmm.
about the power of the audience versus the number of the audience. Someone said to me, oh, I've only got 35 listeners and I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, and those 35, they listen to every single episode every single week. And he said, yes, every week, the same, I think the same 35 people, they download my episode. I said, you are talking to 35 lives. You have 35 people who care so much that they come back week after week after week. Now we need to find out if they're listeners or if they're fans. Get them to do something. Maybe go and you to subscribe to your newsletter. Maybe buy something that you're selling. Maybe buy mentorship, or maybe just send money into your Patreon account where they can support your lifestyle or your business or your or charity. But test your fanship. And he got 31 people who gave money to his charity. It was Parkinson's. And I said, wow, you've got 31 fans. You can do a lot with 31 fans. You could make an event now. And he said, well, how do I do an event? I said, it's very easy. You say all of them need to come to a certain place and they get to watch you podcast live. And then at that opportunity, you could talk to them about what they want to see in the next season of your show. And with events, we can do the exact same thing. If you were doing, so for example, we got this event coming up, Slime event in Berlin, 3rd and 4th of October in Germany. We can now use this to reach out to people who we want to be in the show. So let's say I try and get the number one slime expert, Ninja, to come to our show in Berlin. He won't answer my emails. He's not answering my DMs on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. All I do now is I reach out and I say, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Suddenly he's on my podcast. I get to ask him directly, you've been such a good guest on my show. I'd love you to be a speaker at Slime Berlin on 3rd and 4th of October. And he says, oh, I'd love to do that. Or he says no, but I've got a much better chance of getting him to say yes if he's on my podcast talking to me one to one, human to human, than through an email or a DM that slid into his social media. And I can do the same thing for people if I want to sell stands and conference space. I can't get them on the phone. I can't get them in an email. I can't get them on a letter. I get them on my podcast and I start talking about how great this event is going to be and how perfect their product is for our event. Suddenly they jump on board. So I'm literally selling one-on-one using the podcast as a way to sell my ware versus using an email service.
Yeah. So basically, now podcast is becoming, or rather, we can say it is a new type of content that is in the market that people in the event industry are using it to reach out to their potential customers and clients, right?
Correct, 100% correct. There's a way to not only sort of talk to the people that are listening, but talk to the person directly in front of you. And there's something in podcasting called a pain funnel. And it's an old sales trick. You basically find out from your guest what their biggest problem is. So I ask my guest questions like, so why, how do you currently sell your technology? And they say, oh my gosh, the technology is amazing, but we have to send people an email on LinkedIn. Then we have to try and get them on a call. Then we try to explain the tech through a demo, and then we sign them up. And I say, how difficult is that? And they go, oh, it's so difficult because I've got to send the email, follow up, I've got to do 100 to get 20 people. I say, okay, what if I could tell you that there's an event coming up where you could stand and meet your audience and you could sell from stage, selling to 20 people at a time, 100 people at a time. And suddenly they go, wow, I never knew that. So all I've done is I've used the podcast as a way to take someone through a pain funnel by highlighting their pain and then providing them with a solution right there and then and closing them to come to my event. And I'm doing the same thing by my audience. My audience is listening and thinking, wow, I want to be in the audience with those other 99 people listening to that gentleman or lady talk about their product from stage and get an opportunity to get a deal on the day that I'd never get if I wasn't at that event.
That's very true, and that's a very new thing that I got to learn today about the pain funnel. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
So, getting on to our next question, generally, events demand a lot of pre planning and budget. So, where do you see a podcast fitting in, and how can it be done with the least possible expense?
I think the best way to do is to find a community. Now, I'm not just saying my community. There's quite a lot of podcast communities out there. We have a community called Make Money Podcasting, which is on Facebook. It's free. They get to go on. They get to speak to other people that have started podcasts that are very successful. They get to ask them questions every Thursday at 10 o'clock. We do an hour where I speak directly to everyone on the Facebook, and they get to ask me any questions they may have about what name to use for their podcast, what legal paperwork needs to be done, what emails need to be sent out. They get to ask other people on the page what worked for them, how did they make money from it, how are they speaking to audience members, how are they driving traffic to their websites. And there's a lot of free resources. We've got a website called apodcastcompany.com. And if you click that button, there's a little like a booklet that comes 9 pages, 5 steps to starting a podcast. That's very cost effective. It's probably the only business in the world you can start for less than $200 and sound just as good as someone who spent $10,000 because your audience is good, your storytelling is good, your sound quality is good. But then it's just about, promotion. How do you get people to come listen to your podcast? Have you got all the correct paperwork so that they don't turn around and go, I no longer want you to be on your show? You could say, not a problem. I've already got an email. We've explained how we work. Da, 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 da. So it's just understanding the steps. Again, if I go back to the cooking analogy, it's about knowing that there is a recipe to success. It's not expensive podcasting. It's another great thing about it. and it's very effective. You just need to find a mentor, someone who can teach you every single step of the way, a group of people that can hold you accountable so you stick to all the steps, and people you can ask questions to who can help you on a personal level, who see you as a friend, a colleague, and a peer.
Absolutely agree with the fact that you need a recipe now that you have told me so much about the podcast. So, coming to my last question for this episode, uh, do you have any useful tips for the power of podcasting for events business?
Yes, remember that there are two pillars to a successful event podcast, the pillar of entertainment and the pillar of education. And it's the same two pillars we use in events. I always say to everyone, if an event provides those two things, you're never going to forget. You come for a speaker that educates you on a new way to be sustainable, or a new way to be productive, or a new way to get your message out. And somehow they do it in a way that's entertaining. And if they don't, you meet someone at the event that is entertaining, or you hear of your favorite song, which entertains you, or you get a goodie bag with things that you're so excited to go home with, which entertains you, or you get great photographs of yourself looking pretty and amazing, and you get to share that, which entertains you. So, information and entertainment, they are the pillars of podcasting and they are the pillars of events. And the other thing that's a pillar of an event is a memory. Everyone knows that who makes events, you want to create a memory that people will leave with, whether it's your product, your service, the venue, the food, the speaker, whatever it is, you need to create that memory, and you need to think the same thing for the podcast. What is the one thing I can give them that when they put this podcast down, they're going to have the memory? Maybe it's the memory for you of knowing that I met Mr. Khan and I did Om Shanti Om. Maybe for someone else, it's the memory that monsoon kills all these kids every year in Southeast Asia and people need a way to learn how to swim. But there'll be something there that'll stick to them. And that's what you have to remember. Every single episode needs to have one thing, we call it a value bomb, something that drops into their life and leaves an impression in every episode.
Wow, that was very, very informative and useful. Thank you so much. And really, thank you for coming as a guest speaker to this episode. We are very glad to have you with Hobilo.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your technology, as you know. I think I like all your Instagram pictures.
Yeah, yeah. That's really great, actually.
Anything I can help with, you guys are doing great work. You've got a great tech. So please keep going.
Sure. Thank you. Have a nice day, Jason.
Have a great day. Thank you for having me.